Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Derek Arden, and thanks for joining the Monday night live chat show on this Easter Monday. This was just going to be an informal coffee session today, but I've got some of my great friends from all over the world on the session, so they've decided to join us. So we're going to have a slightly more formal agenda than I had planned. First of all, I'm going to talk about negotiating over a cup of coffee. Then Tim is going to talk to us about perceptions and the perceptions of the UK in the eyes of some of the Americans, particularly Meghan and Harry. Then I'm going to ask Martin to tell us a story, because stories are really important when we're selling, when we're influencing, when we're negotiating, because they work on our unconscious mind and we picture the story as we go along. Then I'm going to ask Will Kintish to tell us about Clubhouse, the new app that I don't know whether I should be using or not, should be having chats, but I saw in the Financial Times this week that it's worth £1 billion already. Now, we know that's a tech startup, and tech startups go at crazy price earnings ratios. And then finally, I'm going to go back to Tim to tell us about the podcast of Tim Ferris. So that's the agenda. Thanks for joining us. But first of all, I want to talk about coffee negotiations, because sometimes they call me the Starbucks negotiator. Why do I like negotiating in Starbucks? Number one, it's on neutral ground. Number two, I buy the coffee, reciprocity under the rules of Robert Gialdini. And number three, we're around a round table, not across a big desk. So that is fabulous reasons to get off site and go to a Starbucks. Story number two is when I was teaching at the Barclays University, and I'm not sure Barclays were qualified enough to call themselves a university, but they had a Canadian CEO at the time. The fire alarm went, and I was running this negotiation course for 25 people for Henley Management College. And the principal told me to take everybody over to Starbucks, and could I carry on with the session over there? And I said, yeah, I think I can, if we can all gather around a table. We were talking about negotiating tactics. And then she said, but can you also show us how good a negotiator you are and negotiate a discount off of 25 cups of cappuccino? Now, at that point, I was sweating. I thought, do Starbucks give discounts? Well, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I got over there quickly, expecting to pay for the discount myself, but I didn't have to. I said, can we have 25 cups of cappuccino, please, and a 10% discount? And the lady said, yes, straight away. I guess my mistake was I should have asked for 20%, but I was so surprised that I was going to get a discount that it blew me away. And the third story is linked to this Porsche coffee cup, which I got from the Porsche dealer in Bournemouth when I went down there to ask him how he negotiated with all those expensive clients that bought Porsches. And as I told one or two of you the story, he said, well, the first thing is we need to identify the client as they drive in. So I've moved the entrance of the garage, cost me £20,000 from X to Y. So my receptionist can see the car number plate when they drive in, put it into the computer, call the salesperson that deals with Mr. Bloggs. So the salesperson is coincidentally walking through the car park as he parks his car and can say, hello, Mr. Bloggs, great to see you, instant recognition, etc., etc. And I said, you don't really do that, do you? He says, yes, of course I do. That's one of the real arts of subliminal selling, making the customer like you, make the customer think they are really special. I think one or two other garages do that, so bear that in mind if suddenly there's a coincidence. I want to talk next about perceptions. Reading the Financial Times on Saturday, I was intrigued by this lady, Kate Bingham, who's a venture capitalist that Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock, the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary, asked to lead the British COVID vaccine pilot, getting someone that was really on the ball. And she took the job straight away. And what did she do that was different to the Europeans, and perhaps not the Americans, but just let me tell you what they were. And first of all, she said, we need to get these vaccines really quickly. So if another company is 50p more expensive, it doesn't matter. We just need to get the vaccines as quickly as possible. That has to be the goal. She didn't really want to take the job on, so Boris Johnson called her and asked her to step up because there was a pandemic. Bearing in mind she was a biochemist that had a first-class honours degree at Oxford, and she was leading a lot of research anyway. And then finally, she talks about having partners rather than adversaries in the negotiation game. Well, it's not a game at all, is it? So I'm going to talk about just thinking about the perceptions before I turn it over to my friend Tim in America. Perceptions are really important in any negotiation situation. But at the moment, according to the Financial Times, the Europeans think the British have got it alone with the vaccine, been a bit arrogant, not sharing the vaccine. Whereas, of course, the Brits think the Europeans were slow off the mark, putting the vaccine, getting the cheapest deal, putting the German and the French vaccines, if that's possible, at first, and slowing down the rollout of the vaccines. 67% of French people think the vaccines are unsafe. 23% of Brits think they're unsafe. That really tells you something when we're now 55% vaccinated in this country. And Tim, we were talking last week about the perception of the royal family in the US, and Meghan and Harry particularly, and that the perception in the UK is totally different to the perception in the US. Can you share a little bit of that with us, please?
Well, yes, and I'll preface by saying I really want to be a little bit careful on how a Yank is commenting on a British situation. But I will tell you from my own perspective and from the perspective of most Americans. Number one, the Oprah Winfrey show. Oprah is a minor deity, maybe a major deity for many people in the United States. She has unbelievable influence. I mean, she's the queen of influence. So for her to get that interview was very important. As Derek and I discussed, I thought her timing was bad with Prince Philip so ill. But nonetheless, I'll also say that I happen to be a royalist. I am a very big believer in the monarchy. I've had an encounter. I spent most of a day with Prince Charles back in the late 1980s. And I can tell you about that if you want. But here's, most of the people in the United States really don't understand the royalty or the concept of royalty. The closest we've ever encountered royalty would be the Kennedy family, which is now all but dissolved. But when Bobby and Edward and Jack and his father and his mom Rose, that was very much almost a royal dynasty, or as close as we could get without a very, very long lineage. So the idea of Meghan and the prince, Harry, is more based on celebrity. While America doesn't embrace royalty, basically because we've never experienced it, they definitely embrace celebrity. I mean, how else could you explain that a bunch of people called the Kardashians actually have $1 billion empire that's made from just following them walking around their house, living their lives. These people have absolutely no talent. They're pleasant for some to look at, but they're very, very big celebrities. So what Meghan wants, she couldn't get her way, my opinion, now we're in my opinion, Meghan couldn't get her way as a royal. She couldn't, royalty is a very, very busy job. And it's not necessarily a lot of celebrity. In the United States, she could get all kinds of attention. They could make all kinds of money. I believe they gave up royalty for celebrity. I also believe strongly that if that is their choice, which obviously it is, they're no longer entitled to the titles. I don't believe that they should have the titles. I also believe, most of us believe, Meghan is an opportunist. We're not fans, a lot of us, but a lot of us are. So that would be my perception. It was a very big interview. It did cast the royal family in a very negative light, which was their intention. I do not believe, and I spent 6 or 7 hours with them. I do not believe Prince Charles or anybody in that family is racist. That really, really bothered me. That is what we call in the United States playing the race card. If you don't like something or you feel maligned, you just say, "Oh, you're playing the race card."
Okay, I'm going to stop you there, Tim, because I just
Okay.
really wanted to talk about perceptions. What I thought was really interesting when we're negotiating, when we're influencing people, it's really important to understand the perceptions of where the other side's coming from, and particularly when we've got cultural differences. As you know, I'm a member of the Golden Gate Breakfast Club, and I mentioned our perception there, and the body language was awful, and I realized I'd said something that I shouldn't have said to the group, and it was at that point I thought I'd just talk to you about perceptions, because perceptions are very different, and if you don't put yourself in the other person's shoes or walk a mile in the other person's shoes, you can't really see where they're coming from.
Derek, I may just challenge you a little bit on that. And that is, I think your perception was wrong. When you mention the royal family, our first instinct is, "Oh, I don't know anything about that." There's ignorance, so they will close up a little bit. I think that the perception wasn't that you said anything wrong. I think the perception is, I don't know enough to be engaged in this conversation, or I only have a little bit of an understanding.
Well, that's really, thanks, Tim. That's really interesting. So my perception of their body language, of their perception, was wrong. So the perception of the perception was wrong. Okay, that's brilliant. Tim, I'm going to come back to you later because we would like to hear about Prince Charles. But I'm going to pass you over to Martin now, if your mic's on, Martin, to tell us one of Martin's stories. Martin is from Ireland, as you know, a great friend of mine, tells some great stories. So I think he's got one for us today. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, I've got a whole lot of stories, but I thought today I'd choose something that had some interest, a little bit of humour, it was topical. And interestingly, as I logged on earlier, I heard the name China mentioned. Well, this story I've chosen for today has got a China link, but I call it my David Beckham story. So, Will, you better listen up, mate. Okay. So in 1998, and I'm very confident about that date. It's not something I'm very good at, but on that particular occasion, I got some facts to remind me, and I'll mention those in a minute. I got asked as a consultant. I was still working for Barclays full time, but I was doing stuff on the side. And I got asked as a consultant by the Institute of Bankers to get involved in a 5-week training program for 25, 30 young people from the Bank of China. They were all graduates, or in some cases double graduates, highly thought of by their employer, and they were sent to England on a 5-week course. And I was one of the consultants that was involved in running the courses. And they'd never been to England before. They were all living together in Bank of China premises in London, and I delivered a number of sessions during the 5 weeks. At the end of the course, there was a presentation ceremony, and it was held in the Bank of China's head office, and on the top floor, they had their own restaurant. So this presentation ceremony was taking place. They were all sort of graduating, being given certificates. And for some reason, the Bank of China asked me to do the presentation amongst the consultants. I don't know why, but they did. So I was handing out these certificates. I have to say, the food that was provided is the best Chinese food I've ever eaten in my life, because they had their own restaurant and their own kitchens in the building. And I was handing out these certificates, and we were having a drink and a bit of socializing afterwards. And I'd got 2 or 3 of these delegates standing around me. And one of them was a young lady in her mid-20s, I guess. These are highly intelligent people. And she said to me, Mr. Martin, because they call me Mr. Martin, do you know any professional footballers? So I said, well, I do know one or two, strangely enough, because I knew one or two of the Leicester City players that I'm a fan of Leicester City. So I said, is there anybody in particular you're talking about? And she said, do you know David Beckham? Now, given this is 1998, she, as it turned out, was from a fairly remote part of China. It just shows you the breadth and length of David Beckham's brand even in those days. So I said, no, I know who you mean. I said, but I don't know him personally. So she said, well, could you get me his autograph? So I said, well, I'll see what I can do. So I said, look, give me your address, because obviously they were going back to China the following day. It was the end of the course. Give me your address and I'll see what I can do. So I came home and I wrote this letter to Mr. David Beckham, care of Manchester United Football Club, Old Trafford, Manchester. And it was at a time when he and his wife, Posh Spice, Victoria, had announced that she was pregnant with her first child. And you'll know that they named their first child Brooklyn because that's where they were when he was conceived, which I thought was an interesting concept, if you'll excuse the pun. Anyway, so I wrote to David Beckham, and I wrote in this letter, I said, look, I know you're a very busy person at the moment, you've got other things on your mind, but I've just run this course with these wonderful people from China, and one of them has asked me to get your autograph. Would that be possible? So, and I even sent a stamped addressed envelope with it, so it was no problem for him to send one back if he felt inclined to do so. Anyway, a couple of weeks later, sure enough, this envelope appears in the post, and inside it is a photograph of David Beckham signed. Well, I was absolutely delighted, but then I noticed the photograph, he was not wearing Manchester United kit. He was wearing what I recognize as Inter Milan kit, which is dark blue and light blue stripes. And he was holding up a can of drink like this. He was sideways onto the camera, and he had a football under his arm. And then I turned it over, and on the back, it had Pepsi colouring. So it was a promotional photograph from Pepsi Cola, for which he was obviously getting paid. And there was this signature at the bottom. And I had to believe that it was his signature. It could have been printed or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, I then wrote a letter to this lady in China saying, look, here's what you asked for. Here's the photograph of David Beckham, and sent it off. Anyway, about 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a reply from this young lady, and it was really interesting because it was written on what I would call rice paper. I don't know if everybody's familiar with rice paper, very thin tissue, with a beautiful floral border on it, and it was handwritten. And she said, "Dear Mr. Martin, you are a true English gentleman. You kept your promise." I thought, well, there's a billion Chinese blokes written off straight away. So I was really pleased about that. And the interesting thing was that I wondered later, musing later, I was thinking, I wonder what would have happened if their first child was conceived in Peckham, which is a place in southeast London. So that would have been a really interesting outcome. And it makes you imagine all sorts of places that children are conceived, and if they're given the first name, back of the bike sheds at school or whatever, it's opened up a whole new world. The lessons here are, first of all, anything's possible if you give it a go. And I was quite happy to try. I didn't hold out much hope. The other thing I've thought about since is, given that China's had such bad publicity over recent years, it's so easy to condemn a nation and at the same time condemn the people. And these people that I was teaching were absolutely delightful. there endeth my story.
Brilliant, Martin. Thanks very much. And interestingly enough, yeah, round of applause for Martin. Well done. Great story and great messages as well. Actually, Martin and I got invited to Cambridge University last year, and another one of my I went to Cambridge University stories just for Paul Sloan. But we were teaching some Chinese people, about 100 of them, weren't we? And they were on a vacation. The whole of Cambridge was taken over by the Chinese in August. I never knew that. And we had some great fun. They were very, very polite, and they particularly liked my magic colouring book. So I might show you that at some stage. But they thought that was the best thing. They wanted photographs with Martin and I. Magic colouring book, which is a magic trick for 8-year-olds that we used at the end. I'd like to turn to Will now. Will Kintish, if you're there up in Manchester. Will, I'm really interested in this app called Clubhouse. I don't know much about it. I'm curious. It's worth $1 billion, and it was only conceived using one of Martin's words. I don't know whether it was in Brooklyn or somewhere in the States. And it's on the market now for a while. The shares changing hands, allegedly at $1 billion. So, Will, can you share with us what you know about it and why it's useful?
I can, but I've got to tell a story. I've got to tell a story after Martin's story of Beckham and the Chinese. We're on holiday in Kenya. We decided to go on a trip to the Masai village, which was literally in the middle of nowhere. And it turned out that the only people that wanted to go on this trip was Mrs. Kintish and myself. So the coach took us and dropped us off in the middle of nowhere. All of a sudden, this Masai warrior came and took us. He didn't speak hardly any English, but as you all know, body language is the most powerful form of communication. And he showed us all the different leaves. Some of the leaves were for health, some of the leaves were for wiping your bottom, and everything. It was primitive. We then get taken to the village. Of course, all the huts are mud huts, enclosure for the animals. All the animals are out during the day where they're looking after them around, and then they bring them back to stop the lions and tigers eating them. We go into the huts, no electricity, nothing. All the women and the children are just sitting around, and we're allowed to take as many pictures as we want, as long as we paid $20. And that was no problem. We're about to go, and all of a sudden this other Masai guy comes over, and the man that was looking after us said, "My brother." So his brother comes over, and he's who did speak a bit of English. He said, "Hello." We said, "Hi, fantastic village." Da, 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 da. He said, "Where are you from?" "From England." "Where about?" "Manchester." "United or City?" we said. I said, "I'm a United supporter." I was shocked, but the next bit, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. He said, "The defense wasn't very good on Monday, was it?" I said, "What?" "We'd just been beaten 3-0 at home by Sunderland." I said, "How did you know that?" Well, it appeared that the hotel we were staying in, they have the Masai warriors doing dancing in certain evenings. In exchange, they don't pay them in money. They pay them in what they call soft dollars. They allowed them to come and watch the football. But that's my football story. I hope you didn't mind me telling that, Martin. But it's one of those stories you never ever forget. Thank you, everybody. Let me do a quick survey. First question is, there's only 2 questions. Who's heard of Clubhouse? 4 out of 16. Apart from myself, is anybody on Clubhouse?
Only because you invited me, Will.
Okay. Not yet.
Okay. I'm not sure it's for you, Tim. Clubhouse is the new boy or the new girl on the block, social media. First of all, at the moment, it is only for iPads and iPhones, and it is audio. So you sign up the app, Clubhouse app, and you wait for somebody to invite you into it. Once you're in it, you can go and listen to conversations. It's as simple as this. There are some people on it at the moment who seem to spend hours and hours and hours on it. So let me give you an example. At the moment, it's 24/7 because it's all global. At the moment, there is a club called Startup Networking, Connect for Partnerships or Guidance. I don't know whether you can see that.
Yeah, we can see that, Will.
In that room, there are 259 people, of which 195 of them have been invited to speak. So you get people who set the room up, they're called moderators, and you join and you are a listener. And then you are allowed, it's obviously all digital to begin with. If you then want to speak, you put your hand up, you press the hand button, and they invite you up to the platform and you speak. And it is as simple as that. I mean, there's all sorts going on. Let me see if I can find a big one. I mean, there's some it's in every language going. There's one here called Money Monday, Billionaire Special Guest. 900 people are on it, and so on and so on. I join them where they're talking about networking. I join the groups where they're talking about LinkedIn, anything relating to me. If there's more than 50 or 60 people involved, I'm not interested, because unless the moderator is your best pal, you don't get invited up to speak. And I have to tell you, everybody, most of them are rubbish. Most of them you'll have no interest in. There's a lot of young people on them who I think have got nothing better to do than just sign up and listen. Having said that, I met a very nice lady called Vicky on it. I've always got something to say if it's a small group. And then what you do, if you think it's worth then building on that relationship, you come off there, you find Vicky on LinkedIn. You can't, apart from talking to Vicky, and only then are you allowed to talk to her if the moderator allows it, because it's hands up all the time. You then find Vicky on LinkedIn, you link in with her, say, Vicky, it was great to meet you on Clubhouse, let's link in. And then if you want to move the relationship to the next stage, you arrange to speak to her or whatever it is. So it's like any networking. I mean, you think about it. Every relationship has to start somewhere. You go to a conference and you go up to Tim, you say, hi, I'm Will. And Tim says, hi, I'm Tim. And we start to chat and it builds from there. So it is a good way of, and the other good thing about it is every single person, you can find out about every one of them, because everybody has got a profile. So this is my profile. And so you can put as much as you want on there. So there's no secret about it. If you want to check them out as a real person, you check them out on there. Most people put their website, their phone numbers and everything. And then you come off Clubhouse and you go onto Google and see if they appear to be a real person. I think there's a lot of security. You can report anybody who swears, anybody who says all the wrong things. I'm going to finish now by saying this to you. Life is about priority. If you've got time to get involved in another social platform, this is one worth getting involved in. If you're very busy, everybody, I'm not sure it's for you.
Okay, Will, thank you very much for that. My question really was also let's take my business, Will, teaching, negotiating, speaking on negotiating. Would it be any point you and I setting up a clubhouse to talk about networking and negotiating and just going on and blasting it out, or is that just a waste of time?
No, let's try it. And the other interesting thing, Derek, is if you say sensible things like I nearly always do, within a few minutes, people start to follow you on here. So I've got 289 followers. I've only been on it a fortnight and I'm following 300 other people. Listen, Derek, whatever form of networking there is, it's a numbers game. You know that. Somebody might say, do you know what, Derek Arden? I've got a team of people who are rubbish at negotiation. Can we have a chat? You get off Clubhouse and you get on the phone to them. So yeah, okay, you and I will do it in the next couple of weeks. We'll do it one lunchtime. I mean, I'm happy to get into the American. I was on one this morning this afternoon at 2 o'clock. It was a LinkedIn discussion. it came from New York. I met Joe through some networking, and it was about 15 or 18 people from all over America. And
okay. Well, I mean, if it's worth $1 billion, then someone thinks it's worth something, unless it's been bigged up. Certainly the Financial Times article I read on Saturday, it's bigged it up big time.
listen, when it comes to buying data, there's a lot of information in those. Someone tells me there's already 6 million people on it, and it's only been going since October.
Yeah, I think that was the number I saw. I don't know, but they make these numbers up, don't they? Like lots of things. That's brilliant. Well, why don't you and I try it, and let's see.
We'll
see
try
what
it.
happens. Perhaps some of the people on this call might join us for a bit of a laugh. They'll certainly.
We'll try it at 5 o'clock in the evening, where a lot of the Americans are in daylight. So yeah, let's try it.
Is there a subscription on that?
No, it's all free, Harry. Everything's free.
So how do they get the valuation?
Excuse me. How did Amazon get the valuation? What about Deliveroo, who's never made a penny in its life? Come on now. And that's valued at what? Even though the shares dropped 30% last week, it's still valued at £4 billion, isn't it? Can you explain it to me?
Yeah.
When I was an accountant, Harry, a thing was only worth something if it made a profit. That doesn't seem to be the rules anymore somehow.
When I was a banker, Will, the real criteria was cash in the bank. Sorry, we know that you accountants had fantastic ways of fiddling the profits. Not you, Will, but a lot of other accountants. I think we called it. In fact, there's a case at the moment of fresh air invoicing, isn't there, that our ex-Prime Minister was involved in. I didn't know what fresh air invoicing was till I went to Barclays Factoring, and then I realised that people just produced invoices and they got paid, and there was no underlying transaction behind it. But yeah, and while you're on Deliveroo, I nearly wrote about Deliveroo and Greensill in my newsletter this morning because I was pretty incensed by the crazy things that are going on at the moment. But you know, Deliveroo, who pays people £2 an hour allegedly, and I don't know if that's round the world, was crashed by 25% when it was launched on the stock exchange last week, and that tells you something, that the bankers that underwrote it totally got the price wrong, and there may be a flaw with it. Who knows? I don't know. And it's supposed to be a tech company, Deliveroo, isn't it? I can't see what techie is. People driving around London on mopeds with learner plates up, but there we go. Must be something more to it than that.
There's supposed to be more to it than that. They took over warehouses and housed restaurants who had to be closed. And these restaurants each had their compartments, an area to work. And when the orders came in, that's where they worked from to get their deliveries out. And that was all built by Deliveroo.
Wow. Okay. Thanks, Harry. I'm just going to go back to Tim now, just for a couple of things. Tim, I'd like you to do two things for us. Tell us a little bit about Prince Charles when he came to Dallas, just quickly, and then tell us a little bit about Tim Ferris and that podcast that you listened to, because I've got Tim Ferris's book here, which I read, The 4-Hour Work Week, although I didn't take to it that well. And you say he's a guy worth listening to. So back to you, Tim.
Yeah. Okay. Well, back in 1986, I worked in a building that was modeled after the Crystal Palace. On the outside, it was identical. And the Crystal Palace was built in London, 1851, and it was housed to show the exposition of the works and industry of all nations, which is code for the First World's Fair. This building was designed by a man named Trammell Crow. And Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, you looked out the window of the hotel when you were in Dallas and saw it across the street, right? The lacy looking building. Some people say it looks like a wedding cake next to a big brown monolithic building.
I did see something like that, and Godfrey and I have played hockey at Crystal Palace, but the Palace has gone there by the time we got to the match.
Yep. Well, the purpose of this building, the man named Trammell Crow, he has a marketplace for shops, and any store can come in and they can buy women's clothes, men's clothes, furniture, of any kind, and he wanted to do this for the computer industry. So in this building was IBM, AT&T, Xerox, company then called Burroughs, the UNIVAC, Apple, Microsoft. I personally signed the lease with a guy named Bill Gates for the smallest amount in the building, and he had to personally guarantee it. And he looked up at me and said, "You should buy our stock." 1986, that would have been a very, very good idea. But anyway,
Tim, you should have been listening to him.
Oh yeah, and we thought he was a whack job. That's why we had him personally guarantee 1,140 square feet. The value of the lease was $40,000, $42,000. But anyway, I digress. Prince Charles is a very big fan, I'm sure you probably know this, of architecture. And he wanted to come to America, but he would not miss a chance to see the imitation, if you will, of the original Crystal Palace, which of course, as you know, is gone. It actually burned down first time. And so he came and he announced that he was coming. And for that reason, every person in the building or would be in the building that day had to go through at least 4 hours of training course as if they were going to meet the prince himself. Now, they said there would be a receiving line. The prince would walk around as he wanted. He would be given a tour, but he'd stop and so on and so forth. And so the women had to learn how to curtsy. The men had to learn how to not extend our hands and shake hands. You don't do that with the prince or royalty. We never hand him a gift. You don't speak unless he speaks. You know, the typical rules of royalty. So anyway, and the people who gave us the training, to a few of us said, we don't think Princess Diana is coming. And if she doesn't come, we can guarantee you one thing. If there is a woman with blonde hair, and in Texas it's called big hair, if there is a woman, a young lady there with blonde hair, you can expect that the prince is going to walk over and greet her. And we thought, oh, that would be great. So, you know, there's a kind of a crowd, an orderly crowd. There's a path for him to walk in. The Jaguars arrived. The British Caledonian bagpipers are there, who are fainting in the 100-degree heat. That was very, very rough. But he walks in, and we had placed some of the Dallas Cowboy, the American football team's cheerleaders, in strategic positions, and they were going to wave their pom-poms, but it just so happened that all of them who were chosen were blonde. Oh, Charles makes a beeline over to them, and he knew who they were. He knew who the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders were, and he engaged them in conversation. Then we went up into a private room, and I can only say this about the prince. So nice. So he was very formal, but then you could see him kind of, as he got a read of the room, there was only 6 other people there, he kind of let go a little bit. He's got a razor sharp wit, or he did that day. And you know, we all talked afterwards, and we said, this guy would be great to have around a campfire where he could really let his hair down and have because he was very interesting. He was a tremendous listener, an unbelievable. He locked on you when you talked, and he was just a delightful person. I would point out that I checked on some pictures of the Duchess, and she now has had for quite a number of years blonde hair. Did you know? Anybody knows that? And I don't remember.
I better stop you there, Tim, before you let any more secrets out. I want to turn to Godfrey, if he can unmute himself, because Godfrey lives very close to a new town called Poundbury, which is a suburb of Dorchester, where also Godfrey is a trustee of the biggest school there, Hardy's, and I think Godfrey knows a little bit about the prince, or is trying to get the prince to come and talk. Over to you, Godfrey.
Thanks, Derek, and thanks, Tim. You're almost right, Derek. It's a bit like your hockey, you know, you almost made the pass, but not quite. Yes, Poundbury is one of Prince Charles's, was the first of his new towns, which It's growing. It's supposed to be finished by 2025. And it will be on track. I don't know if anybody knows it, but it's full of individual architecture and little streets and little local shops, but it is growing. It's very well, some people hate it, the majority like it. It's very well regarded. And that is Prince Charles's idea, and there's another one now down further, actually near where the G7 is going to be in Cornwall. He's doing a similar town down there. But I am involved in the school, which is on Duchy land, but currently our connection is through me looking after Dorchester YMCA, which is one of the oldest in the world, founded 1868. And we're bursting in normal times. We have about 600 young people use us each week. And we need bigger premises. And Prince Charles is our landlord. It is the Duchy. And so we have to ask his permission, show him the plans. And we got the permission. He's very passionate about encouraging young people. So this is exactly the sort of project that he would get behind and tell his executives, you know, go yes and get it sorted. But we do have to think about the style of the roof and certain external looks. But the word is that he's a charming, interested, well-educated man. And I think that is what comes across. He's got a wide range of passions, but he's very well read, a very astute guy, but with a lot of humor. He loves comedy. And I guess one of his most favorite nights would be a night in front of his favorite comedians. But he's a great guy, and I am a big supporter. So he's very well known in this part of England and very well regarded. His tenants, farmers, people with commercial interests are all huge fans because he takes a genuine interest in their well-being.
Thanks, Godfrey. Before we go back to you, Tim, I just wanted to thank Paul Sloan for his book this week. I've been reading it backwards, as I always do, and my dad used to say, as happy as a sandboy, and I had no idea what he was talking about. He was in the North African desert. He was a desert rat in the Second World War, so I thought it had something to do with this. But according to Paul, and I'm not sure if you're winding me up here, Paul.
No, it's true, it's true.
Okay, sandboys were employed in the Wild West bars to clean the floors by spreading sand on them and sweeping it up. Sometimes they found coins from drunken cowboys and it made them very happy. So I shall continue reading it backwards, Paul, because you have
Good.
like that backwards. And if anyone wants a copy of Paul's book, first of all, I have 3 as gifts for anybody, the first 3 people who put it in the chat show and email me their address, because I bought 10 to support Paul and the fantastic charity that Paul supported. So thanks for that, Paul. And Tim, just back to Tim Ferris before I stop the recording and throw it open to everybody.
Well, Tim Ferris, I've been reading Tim Ferris, The 4-Hour Workweek. He actually did work 4 hours and made a lot of money. He then wrote the 4-Hour Cookbook, which I believe is his best book, How to Master Anything in 4 Hours. Now, he has a blog, and he has something that he puts out, 5 Bullet Friday. It's a very short piece that you can get in your email. But I think his real treasure is his podcast. And I believe it has 6 million followers. I think it's the most widely listened to podcast in the world. But he has not just great guests, but he asks great questions. And one of my favorites, and I have a lifelong debt to Will Kintish for introducing me to Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs and his work. He had an interview, Tim had an interview with Rabbi Sachs, and it was just 30 days before Rabbi Sachs past, and it was a wonderful, wonderful one. If I was going to start with Tim Ferriss' podcast, I'd start with Rabbi Sachs, and there's a lot, because he always interviews the highest performers that he can find, and he unpacks them or makes them unpack their secrets, whether they're authors, whether they're fighters, whether they're entrepreneurs. It's a very rich podcast. And so Tim Ferriss, 2 R's, 2 S's. Now, one of the questions that he asks, and I would love to have a session on this, is if you could buy a sign in Piccadilly Circus, one of those revolving signs, one of those crawls, if you will, and you could put anything on that sign that you want, what would you put?
Wow.
What would you put if you could send a message to the most populous or the biggest tourist attraction? He has that in the US on Times Square. The other thing is, what have you bought under 25 pounds or $25? What have you bought that has been one of the best things you've ever bought at any price? So he asks those kind of questions, gets amazing questions. What's the best book you ever read in your life? And what's the book you've given away most, that you bought with your own money, given it away the most? So Tim asks very good questions, and I highly recommend it. Very informative, long form podcast.
Thanks, Tim. Tim, would you do a session on that? Maybe we could do half a session on that at some stage, or whatever.
On the questions?
Yeah, on the questions. They are pretty powerful questions, aren't they? I can't think of the answers at the moment, so I'd need to get in a group with some people and have a think.
I would be happy to, because I think those are very probative questions. And I will also say that Tim's book, I said 4-hour cookbook, Tools of the Titans, which is the people. Yeah, that's a 4-hour work week. He has a 4-hour cookbook, but his best is a conglomeration of all of the movers and shakers. It's called Tools of the Titans, because he always goes to the Titan in business, the Titan in IT, the Titan in social media, and he's very good at interviewing.
Okay, well, that's brilliant, Tim. Thanks very much for that. And I'm going to stop the recording now, but thanks to my guests that have all joined in. Thanks for Martin for his story. Thanks for Will for putting us straight on the latest app. And thanks to you, Tim, for your stories. And thanks for everybody for joining us. And look forward to seeing you next week, and enjoy the sunshine while it lasts over here. So I'll stop the recording now, and we'll see what other questions we've got.